Pull over! The words cut through the thick Detroit air like a blade. Marvin Gaye pressed his face against the window of his black Cadillac Eldorado, staring at something that made him forget he was already 40 minutes late for his session at Hitsville, USA. On the cracked sidewalks of Cass Avenue, a young boy was singing with a voice that seemed to carry the weight of the world. What the Prince of Soul witnessed in the next few minutes would change everything he thought he knew about music's true purpose. It was a humid September evening in 1974, the kind of Detroit night when the heat from the auto factories mixed with the summer air, creating a haze that hung over the city like a prayer waiting to be answered. 12-year-old Marcus Washington had set up his usual spot outside Coleman Young's campaign headquarters, where the energy of change seemed to pulse through the streets. His father's old acoustic guitar, held together with electrical tape and faith, rested against his small frame. A harmonica hung around his neck on a piece of twine his mother had salvaged from her work at the Ford plant. Marcus's bare feet were dusty from the unpaved alleys of the Corktown neighborhood where they lived. His patched jeans had been hand-sewn by his mother, Miss Ruby Washington, who worked double shifts at River Rouge just to keep their lights on. The boy had no idea that 60 blocks away, the man whose voice had become the soundtrack to a generation was sitting in traffic, wrestling with his own demons. Marvin Gaye had been struggling. Despite the success of Let's Get It On, despite the Grammys and the gold records, something felt hollow inside. He'd been asking himself the same question that had driven him to write What's Going On 3 years earlier. What was the point of it all if the music didn't heal anything? If it didn't lift people up? If it didn't speak to the pain he saw in every pair of eyes, on every street corner, in every American city? Berry Gordy had been pushing him to record more commercial material, more dance hits, more of what the label called safe music. But Marvin's spirit was crying out for something deeper, something that mattered. He'd been driving aimlessly through Detroit for hours, avoiding the studio, avoiding the pressure, avoiding the feeling that he was losing his connection to the very thing that had saved his life. Music with a message. Marcus had been coming to this corner every Friday evening for 3 months, ever since his mother's hours got cut and the bills started piling up faster than Detroit snow. With his father deployed in Vietnam and his little sister Keisha needing new school clothes, every dollar Marcus earned from street performing went straight into the coffee can his mother kept hidden behind the sugar jar in their tiny kitchen. Their apartment on the 3rd floor of a crumbling tenement had thin walls, unreliable heat, and windows that let in more cold air than light. Miss Ruby worked 16-hour days when she could get them, coming home with grease under her fingernails and a cough that seemed to get worse every winter. She had no idea her eldest boy was spending his Friday evenings singing on street corners, risking trouble with gangs or police or worse. But Marcus couldn't help himself. Music wasn't just something he did for money. It was the only thing that made sense in a world that seemed determined to grind down everything beautiful. When he sang, the weight of responsibility lifted from his 12-year-old shoulders. When he sang, he could transform the pain of watching his mother cry over unpaid bills into something that might help other people feel less alone. As Marcus tuned his father's guitar with strings that had been replaced one at a time, whenever he could afford it, he looked around at the familiar chaos of Cass Avenue. Auto workers heading home after long shifts, ladies in their church dresses walking to evening service, kids playing stickball between parked cars. The constant sound of soul music drifting from open windows and doorways, creating a symphony that had become the soundtrack to his weekend performances. Tonight felt different. There was electricity in the air, something that made his fingertips tingle as he positioned the guitar. Marcus had been working on a new arrangement of What's Going On, the song that had changed his understanding of what music could be. He'd spent hours in the stairwell of their apartment building, the only place where his voice could echo properly, perfecting each note while listening to Marvin Gaye records on his neighbor's radio through the paper-thin walls. As Marcus struck the opening chord and closed his eyes, he felt that familiar transformation begin. The shy boy who barely spoke up in class, who got nervous asking for extra work from shopkeepers, who preferred to blend into backgrounds wherever he went, completely disappeared. In his place emerged someone who could command attention with nothing but honesty and an old guitar. His voice seemed to carry generations of struggle and hope. Every note told a story of families working multiple jobs just to survive, of children growing up too fast, of communities holding each other up when everything else was falling apart. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. People stopped mid-stride, their evening plans forgotten as they watched this young artist pour his soul into every phrase. "Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying," Marcus sang, his voice carrying a wisdom that seemed impossible from someone who hadn't even reached his teens. The words took on new weight in his young voice, speaking to the mothers working factory lines, the mothers raising children alone, the mothers who understood that sometimes crying was the only honest response to the world. A crowd began forming around Marcus, but he was lost in his own world, completely absorbed in the music. Each phrase was deliberate, each pause calculated, each vocal run earned through hours of practice in empty stairwells. He wasn't just copying Marvin Gaye's style, he was interpreting it, adding his own story of a boy watching his mother work herself to exhaustion, of a father's letters from a war that didn't make sense, of a community struggling to hold on to hope. 6 blocks away, caught in the endless downtown Detroit traffic that moved like molasses in September heat, Marvin Gaye was getting increasingly frustrated. He was already late for a session that Barry Gordy had been planning for weeks, and the gridlock stretched endlessly ahead of his convoy. His manager was making frantic calls to Hitsville, trying to buy them more time. That's when Marvin heard something that made his heart stop. His own music, but performed with a passion and understanding that cut through the noise of the city like lightning through storm clouds. The sound was coming from somewhere ahead, carried on the evening breeze, and it reminded him instantly of why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. "James, what's that sound?" Marvin asked his driver, pressing his face against the window and trying to locate the source of the music that was pulling at something deep in his chest. James Hunter pointed toward the growing crowd 6 blocks ahead. "Looks like a street performer, Mr. Gaye. Some kid singing your songs." Marvin squinted through the heat waves rising from the asphalt, trying to get a better look. Even from this distance, he could see that something special was happening. The crowd was growing larger by the minute, and there was an energy in the air that you only felt when witnessing something truly sacred. "I need to hear this up close," Marvin whispered, his hand already moving toward the door handle. "Sir, maybe we should keep moving," James cautioned, glancing nervously at the crowd. "Mr. Gordy's already called 3 times, and if people recognize you—" "James," Marvin interrupted, his voice filled with a wonder his team rarely heard anymore. "Sometimes God puts you exactly where you need to be, even when you think you should be somewhere else. Especially then." Meanwhile, Marcus was deep into his performance, executing a vocal run that drew gasps from the growing audience. His young voice seemed to carry the weight of every struggle he'd witnessed, channeling something ancient and powerful that had nothing to do with his 12 years on Earth. He was so completely focused on the music, so absorbed in the message he was trying to convey, that he didn't notice the black Cadillac that had pulled over at the edge of the crowd, or the man in the signature beard and gentle eyes who was now standing at the back of the audience, listening with growing amazement. The whispers started slowly, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Is that? No way. Someone's getting this on camera. That's really him. Marvin Gaye is here. Should we say something?" "Don't scare him away." But Marvin's attention was completely fixed on Marcus. The way the boy sang reminded him powerfully of himself at that age, but also of something deeper, the pure hunger that radiated from every note, the complete dedication to the message that blocked out everything else in the world, the way music could become a vehicle for truth-telling, for healing, for change. This kid had something that couldn't be taught in any music school or conservatory. This was raw talent seasoned with real-life experience, filtered through a heart that understood suffering and still chose to sing about hope. This was what Marvin had been searching for during all those aimless drives through Detroit streets. This was why music mattered. As What's Going On reached its climactic bridge, Marcus launched into the most challenging part of his arrangement, a series of vocal runs that spoke to the complexity of the times they were living in, followed by that signature Marvin Gaye ending that required perfect breath control and emotional honesty. The crowd held its collective breath as the young singer pushed his voice to its limits, executing techniques that professional singers spent years perfecting. When the final notes faded and the last echo bounced off the surrounding buildings, Marcus held his father's guitar close and bowed his head in the humble way his mother had taught him. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. People were shouting praise and encouragement. Money began flying into Marcus's guitar case. Quarters, dollar bills, even a few fives from folks who had just witnessed something they'd never forget. But when Marcus lifted his eyes to acknowledge their kindness, his entire world stopped spinning. Standing there at the back of the crowd, wearing that unmistakable gentle smile and those famous eyes, was Marvin Gaye himself. Not a look-alike, not someone dressed up for fun, but the actual living legend. Sweet Jesus, Marcus breathed, his voice barely audible over the continued cheering. This can't be real. This isn't happening. His knees started to shake, and for a moment he thought he might collapse right there on the cracked sidewalk. The boy who had just performed with the confidence of a seasoned professional suddenly felt like what he was, a 12-year-old kid from the wrong side of Detroit who was face to face with his biggest hero. Marvin stepped forward slowly, carefully navigating through the crowd that was now buzzing with excitement and recognition. He removed his sunglasses with deliberate ceremony, revealing those eyes that had conveyed so much pain and beauty through his music, and flashed that gentle smile that could fill stadiums with love. "That was absolutely beautiful, young brother," Marvin said, his voice carrying that distinctive warmth that had comforted millions. "Where did you learn to sing with such truth?" Marcus's knees nearly buckled. Marvin Gaye, the Prince of Soul, was not only talking to him, but complimenting his singing with words that sounded like they came from someplace sacred. This had to be a dream. In a few minutes, he'd wake up on the mattress he shared with his sister in their tiny apartment, and none of this would have happened. "I listen to your records every day, Mr. Gaye," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I practice with my daddy's guitar whenever Mama's at work. She says I'm crazy for singing the same songs over and over, but your music, it helps me understand things. It helps me hope." The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting to witness this magical moment unfold. Security personnel were making their way through the people, but Marvin waved them off with a subtle gesture that spoke to years of experience managing these situations with grace. "What's your name, son?" Marvin asked, kneeling down to Marcus's eye level so they could speak more intimately despite the chaos around them. "Marcus Washington, sir. I'm 12 years old and you're the reason I believe music can change the world. You're the reason I think my voice might matter for something." Marvin's eyes glistened with genuine emotion. This boy reminded him powerfully of himself at that age, but also of something he'd been searching for. The raw connection between music and message, between art and purpose, between singing and healing. He could see something in Marcus's eyes that he recognized from his own childhood. The hunger, the dream, the desperate hope that somehow, some way, music could make things better. "Marcus," Marvin said softly, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I want you to have something very special." The crowd fell silent as Marvin pulled out a small piece of paper. It was the original lyric sheet from What's Going On, handwritten in his own careful script, the document that had started his journey toward making music that mattered. The paper was worn with age but carefully preserved, and it seemed to glow in the late afternoon Detroit sunlight. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. People were frantically trying to capture this moment, realizing they were witnessing something that would become part of music history. "These lyrics changed my life," Marvin continued, placing the paper gently in Marcus's trembling hands. "But I think they belong with someone who truly understands what it means to sing from the soul. Someone who reminds me why I fell in love with music in the first place." Marcus stared at the handwritten lyrics in complete disbelief, tears streaming down his face. "I can't take this, Mr. Gaye. It's too important. It belongs with you. Music is meant to be passed down from one generation to the next, Marcus. Talent like yours is meant to be nurtured and celebrated. Promise me you'll never stop singing, no matter what obstacles you face. Promise me you'll always remember that your voice has power to heal." Then Marvin's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration, that spark of creativity that had driven him to become one of music's most important voices. "You know what? Let's do this together. Would you like to sing with me right here? Right now? The crowd went absolutely wild. This was beyond anything anyone could have imagined when they woke up that morning. Cameras were clicking, and word was spreading rapidly through Detroit that something unprecedented was happening on Cass Avenue. Marcus nodded eagerly, unable to form words. This was the moment every young musician dreamed of. The chance to perform alongside their idol, to share the stage, even if that stage was just a city street with greatness itself. Marvin signaled to James, who quickly retrieved a guitar from the Cadillac. The crowd made room, forming a large circle around the two singers as anticipation reached a fever pitch. "Let's give these people something that will stay in their hearts forever," Marvin said with that gentle smile his fans knew and loved. As Marvin strummed the opening chords of Inner City Blues, something truly magical happened. Marvin Gaye, the Prince of Soul, and Marcus Washington, a street kid with a dream, began singing together in the middle of Cass Avenue in downtown Detroit. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. Marcus, who moments before had been nervous and starstruck, found his confidence again as the music washed over him. He harmonized with his idol perfectly, understanding instinctively how to complement Marvin's voice without trying to compete with it. When Marvin hit those famous low notes, Marcus found the harmony. When Marcus added his own embellishments, Marvin incorporated them seamlessly into his own performance. For 4 minutes and 37 seconds, there was no superstar and no street performer. There was no difference in age, fame, or fortune. There were just two artists sharing their love of music and message with the world, connected by the universal language of truth-telling through song. When the final chord rang out across Cass Avenue, the applause was thunderous and sustained, echoing off the buildings and seeming to shake the very ground beneath their feet. People were crying, cheering, and many were saying this was the most beautiful thing they'd ever witnessed. Marvin put his arm around Marcus's shoulder and addressed the crowd with the same presence and grace he brought to concert halls across America. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying clearly over the noise, "you have just witnessed something truly special. This young man has reminded me why I became a performer in the first place. He's shown me that music's power to heal and uplift knows no boundaries. Remember the name Marcus Washington. Mark my words, you're going to be hearing it again." The crowd erupted again, chanting Marcus's name as if he were already a star. But Marvin wasn't finished. He turned back to Marcus and spoke quietly, away from the cameras and the noise, his words meant for the boy's ears alone. "I'm going to give you something more than just this lyric sheet, Marcus," Marvin said, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back. "I'm going to make sure you get the opportunities you deserve. Talent like yours shouldn't be performing on street corners. It should be reaching every heart that needs healing." 5 years later, Marcus Washington stood on the stage of the Apollo Theater, performing for thousands of screaming fans. Marvin Gaye had been true to his word in every possible way. Not only had he arranged for Marcus to receive professional training with the best voice coaches in Detroit and Nashville, but he had also established a full scholarship fund to cover the boy's education. Miss Ruby Washington, who had been working herself to the bone at River Rouge, was able to cut back to reasonable hours after Marvin quietly arranged for ongoing support for the family. They moved out of their tenement into a beautiful house where Keisha could have her own room and Marcus could practice music without disturbing anyone. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus never forgot the lessons from that life-changing September evening on Cass Avenue. The importance of staying humble, of using music to heal rather than just entertain, of never forgetting where you came from or the people who need your voice most. Today, Marcus Washington is a Grammy-winning soul artist, following in the tradition of conscious music that speaks to social issues while lifting spirits. His albums have topped the charts, and his concerts sell out arenas across America. In his home studio, he keeps that original "What's Going On" lyric sheet in a place of honor. Not as a museum piece gathering dust, but as a daily reminder of the moment when recognition and kindness changed his life forever. Every month, without fail, he returns to Detroit to Cass Avenue, teaching music to kids who remind him of himself. Children from struggling families. Kids who sing because they have to, not because they want to. He always tells them the same thing Marvin told him that day. Sing from your heart, use your voice to heal, And never give up on your dreams. You never know who might be listening. The story of their impromptu street performance has been passed down through Detroit folklore, inspiring countless young musicians around the world. But for Marcus, the real magic wasn't captured in any newspaper or magazine. It was that moment when his hero looked into his eyes and saw not just a street performer trying to make a few dollars, but an artist worthy of respect, investment, and belief. Some encounters change lives in ways that ripple out for generations. Some moments transcend ordinary experience and become the stuff of legend. And sometimes when the music is right and hearts are open, magic happens exactly where you least expect it. On a cracked sidewalk in downtown Detroit, between a superstar questioning his purpose and a boy with nothing but a dream, destiny made its move. This story serves as a powerful reminder that talent can emerge from anywhere, that kindness has the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire families, and that music truly is the universal language that connects us all. Because sometimes the most important performances don't happen on grand stages in front of thousands of screaming fans. Sometimes they happen on ordinary street corners, where dreams are waiting to be discovered and lives are ready to be changed forever. All it takes is someone willing to stop, to listen, and to believe in the power of music to heal the world.